Hi. Thank you for joining us. We are talking today about how to build a direct audience and go direct to consumer. We have 30 minutes, so we're going to pack a lot in and try to save about 5 minutes at the end for questions. So if you have questions, please give that some thought and raise your hand when that time comes. I'm Mary Walter Brown. I'm the founder and CEO of the News Revenue Hub. We're a journalism support organization based in the US. We help news organizations grow audience and revenue. Our mission is to sustain the public's access to news and information, and for the last 9 years, that's primarily meant working with news organizations. But more and more, as newsrooms struggle to keep up with the demand, we're finding that people are getting what they consider to be really crucial news and information from other sources beyond traditional news. So today we're really going to talk about some of the challenges that creates, but also the opportunities. And so this isn't a session about how do you become a content creator. There's several of those that are happening in IJF. We're really going to be talking about how do you center audience when you're growing a direct-to-consumer relationship. And we have two guests who are thinking about that constantly. I'm joined by Sophia Smith Galer, a former BBC and Vice reporter, who then went on to become an independent content creator with over 800,000 followers. And trust me, that's more than many local news audiences. Also, Ian Phillips from the AP, who's now building a... Formerly at the AP, now at the UN, building out their news operations there. We're finding more and more individuals going direct to consumer, but we're also finding a lot of corporations and intergovernmental agencies doing it. So today we're going to find out exactly how do you make that happen. So Sophia, I want to start with you. Take us from the point where you were at BBC and then Vice, and you made the decision to strike out on your own, feeling you could have a bigger impact, build a bigger audience, and I assume even raise more money for yourself, building a niche audience, which I find really fascinating, around language and linguistics.
Yeah, so I had always been building a community around my reporting since my time at the BBC, where I was a video journalist. I took that following with me. At that point, it was still mainly TikTok and Twitter were where I mainly had an audience. And then I joined Vice News as a senior news reporter. That following comes with me. A big thing was all the platforms wanted to copy TikTok. So Instagram launched Reels in order to be competitive. I started posting my content there, and unsurprisingly, my following then built up rapidly on Instagram, to the point that I have quite distinctive audiences actually between TikTok and Instagram. And my profile got to a point where I thought, I think I can go it alone. I can feel like I have more control over the creative projects that I take on, and choice. And I was interested to see what interesting things would come my way. I also wanted to write the book that I'm now getting towards the end of, and I've had to spend about nearly 3 months abroad to write that book. So there's no way I could have written the book I'm doing, which is about linguicide and language endangerment and death, had I stayed in a staff job, because they wouldn't have given me enough annual leave to go and do it. Whereas as a freelance journalist and content creator, I can work remotely far more easily. And yeah, so now my average working week looks very distinctive. It could be one day I am making a podcast for Radio 4 at the BBC still. You know, I work with traditional media all the time. But then the next day I might be making a video for my own channels that goes out. And then the next day something else here and there. And I love having that. Someone told me to call it a portfolio career. I think that's a very nice phrase. So that's how I look at my career now.
One follow-up question to that is, when you were at the BBC and then at Vice, you really embraced building your own direct audience beyond the brands of the BBC and Vice. Why did you think that was so important at that time? And for the journalists in the room who haven't quite embraced directly building an audience beyond the brand they work for, why was that such an important decision?
For me, it wasn't, I guess, kind of beyond, but for me it was in extension, because it was always to try and amplify the work that I was doing for those organizations. And the early data that was appearing when I first joined TikTok and first started making vertical video for myself, which is all the way back in just before the pandemic began. That's how long we're talking now. The data was already telling us, hey, people are using this as a news and information source. And now, all of the early adopters, I'm by far the only journalist who did this. In the UK, I am one of the only few who did this, but we've been vindicated. Now, the amount of people who are consuming information and news via social media video is really high across global markets. It's about 66% of global markets. So I did it because the audience was there. And my work has to be accessible to my audience.
Ian, you went from over 20 years at the AP to now diplomacy at the United Nations. What was that transition like, first of all? And tell us about the UN's news operation. I think a lot of people don't exactly know what the UN does. It's so vast, but especially, I don't think most of us think of it as a content creator.
That's a great question. Well, how was the transition? I left the AP on a Friday afternoon in April 2023, and I started at the UN on the Monday morning. And people said, "You're crazy. You've got to take a month off. You got to, just think this through." It was the easiest transition, to be honest. And surprisingly, I'd say that I see huge similarities between the two organizations. One is obviously a storied news organization. The United Nations also has a lot of similarities. It's global in reach. It needs structural change, just like AP did. It has a huge audience potentially, and it has eyewitness people in the field all around the world. They're not technically journalists, but if you can turn that into content, you have an incredibly powerful machine at your fingertips. So that's the transition we're going through at the UN. You ask, and by the way, a lot of people think of the UN as a large bureaucratic, unwieldy organization. It is, but it's actually about 100 years younger than the AP, right? So I'm trying to look at this as crazy as this might sound, a bit of a startup operation at the UN, which, you're probably thinking he's out of his mind saying that, but there is a real potential to build something here that's quite powerful. We're not competing with the media. Historically, as you said, Mary, we have created news content, but it's hard to find. It's still hard to find. Don't look now. You'll still be saying, where is it? But I'm trying to build a platform that hopefully this time next year will be in use, and you will really be able to answer that question of yours about what is the UN, what do you do? Now, it is unwieldy. It is something that was built after the Second World War. It does have dysfunctionality. The Secretary General talks about this quite openly. The Security Council has to change, and it doesn't change because who wants to give up power? But there are incredible things happening at the UN, and I think it's just worth, to your point, talking about some of that. It's much more than the Security Council. It's more than the General Assembly. It's people in the field who are, witnessing conflict at first hand, who are feeding children who do not have food, who are inoculating children around the world, who are developing programs, building roads, building schools. This is incredible eyewitness journalism of a kind. Really, it's so I don't see there was such a huge transition from the AP to the UN. It's a similar mindset. It's a similar challenge. We just need to be able to work the machine in a way that produces content, and content that is accessible. I'll just my last point will be anyone who has touched on UN content will know that it's really hard to understand. It's technical. The language is dense. There are acronyms that blow your mind. That was the hardest transition for me. But if we can translate that into language that people can understand, whether they're professionals in the field or academics or students or high school children or middle school children, then I think we have an incredible opportunity here.
I assume there's a particular level of urgency right now as aid to the UN and the UN agencies are being slashed and lives are being endangered. How's that influencing your approach to this work right now? And what's the most important message, and who, when we're talking about centering audience, who is it that you want to reach right now?
So yeah, it's hard to divorce yourself from the current political situation, which, you know, the UN is being buffeted by this pressure, as are news organizations, as are institutions all around the world. I actually look at it as a huge opportunity. The UN does need to change, right? It needs to be more streamlined. It does need to look at its budgets and think, how can we spend this money better? So it's no bad thing that there is more scrutiny these days around the UN. We need to talk to the public. We are funded by taxpayers, right? Countries, Italy, the US, every country on earth gives a large amount of money to the UN. We have to show that that is being invested right. And I don't think the UN has that reputation, if I'm honest, about, you know, using money wisely. It's just a huge organization, and how do you show accountability? It is an honest organization that has, you know, the greatest interests of the planet close to its heart, whether it's climate or equality, or, you know, feeding children, or stopping wars. It's easier said than done, and I think we're a scapegoat for a lot of people because it's really hard to solve all those things, right? So, but if we can do a better job to explain who we are, why we were created back in 1945, and how we're going to project forward to be sort of fit for purpose in the 21st century, then that's an organization you want. And we're seeing all around the world now, not just in the US, which I assume your question was hinting at. We're seeing countries turn away from foreign aid. In Europe, a lot of countries are building up their military capabilities at the expense of foreign aid, right? We have to do a better job explaining the dangers of that. If you cut foreign aid, there is a proven link to surges in radicalism, in nationalism, and those issues, those conflicts, those diseases in terms of health will spread. You know, we saw in the pandemic, things spread across borders, right? So we have to do a better job explaining why multilateralism, a complicated word, you know, why all this is important, why countries need to work together, and this surge in nationalism that we're seeing across the world is a big risk.
Sophia, I think you can teach all of us some lessons. You're now a consultant that works with companies and content creators to help them find their audiences. How do you center audience in the work that you do? What kind of metrics are you looking at, and how much do they play into your decisions when you're deciding what type of content to produce and how to distribute it?
It's a good question, because you cannot simply rely on, oh, well, if we're on TikTok, we're going to reach people. If we're on Instagram, we're going to reach people. It's like, amazing, you've done step one. You're in the right place to now catch these eyeballs. You're in the right place where your work, if you get amplified on this, you know, hyper powerful algorithm, yes, you're gonna really improve awareness about you and your reach. It's now such an oversaturated space that in order for content to be seen, you do have to think about things like, how am I really responding to what the audience needs? Are there creators or information providers who are already delivering and serving audience needs? In which case, how do I disrupt that? How do I come in? Because actually this is a crowded space I'm stepping into. It doesn't matter whether you've been doing this for years or whether you're new to it. I have to think of those same things with my own content. I have to keep innovating. I have to keep thinking about, right, this did well, this did less well. Why did that happen? What should I take moving forward? I pay a great deal of attention to my own analytics that I'm being given. When you have a backlog of work, and when you have lots of videos to draw information from, you can make greater and better decisions because there's more data at hand. If you haven't even made a single video, then you don't have that really quite precious information that I encourage you to begin building. So that's mainly what I recommend to people. And responding to audience needs, your audience is telling you what they're looking for by what they're searching for. They're telling you by what's already going viral or overperforming on platforms. That's the information is out there if we go looking for it. It's not this sort of secret recipe that I've been cooking and like not telling anyone about. It's actually all very public information that we can all draw from for our particular, you know, what we specifically are offering as, say, a news publication or an organization.
You told me a story that I thought was really interesting that I think would resonate with other reporters, that when you were at Vice, you would produce a Vice version of your story, and then you would create a Sophia's reporter's cut version of the story. What did you see about audience behavior when you A/B tested those two stories? What were they responding to most?
I think this is so important for anyone here who manages people who might be making social media content, and also, any organization that wants to pursue what we did, which got huge numbers online for our journalism at Vice. So I would make 2 videos for the same piece of reporting that I did. One of those videos would be sort of co-commissioned with my news editor. So the news editor within my team, Matt Champion, who's fantastic, was as good at being the editor on written articles as he was on video. That's the secret to a good news team, where the social is not siloed. The social is part of it. And I might say to him, oh, this is the video I want to make about this story. And he'd be like, cool, go do it. I would do it. He would sign off the script. We'd also have another social media producer signing off the script. I'd make it, and then it would be edited by a social media producer who would edit it in like the Vice style guide, as it were. Then I would make my own video. No sign-off process. It's my video on my platform. And yeah, I describe it like a reporter's cut, because I always think about like the director's cuts you'd get like DVDs for, and you like watching it from their perspective. So that's how the reporter's cut would be. And so the language would sometimes be slightly more personal, or I would say within it, the Vice explainer would be a lot sort of drier and the bare facts, whereas I might say in my personal one, like, I've been investigating this for 3 months. You know, I might reveal some extra information about the story. They'd both go up. They'd both perform very well. If you ran a sentiment analysis on the comment sections of each of those videos, my content on my personal page, as it is the majority of the time, a largely positive sentiment analysis. I always surprise people when I tell them the vast majority of interactions I have online are extremely positive. I get asked all the time about online harassment and stuff, and obviously I experience it, but the vast majority of my experience is very positive. Well, maybe if I made videos for Vice all the time, it wouldn't be, because the comment section on those videos, I was totally dehumanized. Anyone here who has had to present video under a news brand or a legacy brand will often find that the content is totally sort of disassociated from them as people. So as an experience, what do I prefer making content for or as? I far more prefer making content under my own name. I'm going to have a happier time doing it.
It's a great experiment. I recommend reporters trying. For you, as you're embarking on this work with the UN going direct and figuring out interesting ways to translate what may be complicated, complex content to a new audience. I know you're talking to a lot of different people and doing audience research, but I thought it was particularly interesting that you said a group of Berkeley students who were working on a project for the UN said, we don't want to see the UN in our feed. We don't want to see companies in our feed. So how are you going to get around that? Are you thinking about using celebrity UN ambassadors to do, some influencer work? What's the plan?
Yeah, so we were approached by students on the west coast of the US, brilliant young minds. I wish I could hire them all. And they wanted to critique UN platforms. And trust me, there's plenty to critique. And they talked about wanting a frictionless environment, right? They don't want, the minute they think this is too institutional, the minute they think this is, PR or just organization speak, they just move away. They're done, and they're thinking, in fact, why are you even on my feed? So we really have to understand how to speak to people, in what tone, and meet them where they are, as everybody always says. And that translates beyond social media, right? We are trying to engage with the audiences around the world and use AI to sort of bring in intel about what people are talking about, what questions are they asking, You know, all those years in a news organization, I would be frustrated at the sort of the news meeting mindset, which was very closed, right? It was good, it was inspiring, but we were deciding what people should be reading or watching, right? And I often would sit there thinking, why are our customers not in this conversation? Why aren't they listening in and talking proactively so that we got a better sense of what they wanted? I'm trying to do that on a global scale. It's really difficult, but the research is just clear. One size does not fit all. Just like, you know, an organizational tone from New York doesn't resonate with students on the West Coast. You've got to sort of tailor your language. You've got to tailor your content. In East Africa, Gaza isn't the biggest story, even though for many of us every day at the UN we're talking about Gaza, Gaza, Gaza. They want to hear about tuberculosis, malaria. They want to understand climate change and the effects of that on their crops. So we have to figure out how to create content and dialogue that fits for community radio stations in East Africa that have a small audience. But frankly, that excites me as much as getting published on CNN or France 24 or anything like that, because you're reaching people and you're saying something that they are interested in. We're not sort of talking down to people, and I think that's a lesson for the media as much as one for an intergovernmental organization like the UN or any content creator.
You see a lot on social media, journalists, and maybe I did it in my first few videos, I don't know, but a lot of journalists, the first time they make content on social media, will still use news voice. They'll still be speaking like this very important thing has happened, and it's like, no one sounds like that on here. You're already sort of saying that you're not willing to come and speak our language. That's kind of how it feels. Yeah. So you're really right to think about voice and tonality. It's not to be ignored. Yeah,
I was in China last year talking to media organizations, universities, many others about how can we engage with China, like a massive, massive country that is showing increasing interest in the work of the United Nations. And they said a similar thing. They said, you know what, forget all this institutionalized stuff you put on social or even on your platforms. Just do a live feed walking through the UN. You know, show us what it's like. Make it raw, make it, you know, vertical video, messy, you know, trip up, you know, get stuck and, you know, acknowledge, you know, the complexity of this place, but just show us what the place looks like. Capture the spirit in the building. And I'm like, wow, yeah, that is such interesting advice. And they said, you will reach millions that you'll never reach talking the way you talk.
Yeah, the number one pushback we get from our clients when we tell them to do more social media is that they don't have time to do this big production work. And I'm like, it doesn't have to be perfect. You just need to get out there and start doing it. I think we were at the 20-minute mark before someone mentioned AI. So I want to find out how the two of you are thinking about using AI to make your jobs easier in terms of reaching audience.
So the main work I do with AI is actually trying to help other journalists do what I have done. So I'm very lucky that I got 2 grants, one from Women in Journalism in the UK and another one from the International Centre for Journalists just at the end of the last year in order to make an app that's called Sophia, because it's like having a little Sophia in your pocket. With Sophia, you give her an article that you've written, or written work, long form that you're proud of, that took a lot of time for you to make. You copy and paste that script into the tool. It gives you a few hooks for you to see if you like. You pick which hook you like. It then generates the rest of the script for you, and then you can film the script immediately with a teleprompter built into the app. And I made that tool because when I was training journalists and being asked a lot, as I have been over the last few years, how can I make content like this? And I say to them, well, what's your biggest obstacle? They always say it's time and video skills. So I knew that the tool I had to build had to address those obstacles, otherwise it wouldn't be helpful for people. I'm user testing it tomorrow at 1 o'clock. If anyone wants to join me, LinkedIn message me. So I've made that because I want to see more experts and journalists amplifying their work on vertical video. So it uses AI married with my knowledge base that I have given the tool. In terms of how I use AI for my job, I'm not using it at all for content creation myself yet. like with most journalists, the first time I properly started using it was transcription. So for the interviews that I'm doing for my book, I've been using Descript, really enjoying it. And my goodness, my life has been changed by email management. So I pay to use Fixer, which has changed my life, my inbox management, which uses AI. So it's actually helping me sort of steamroll through some of the more admin / frankly boring things in my life and enabling me to focus more on my creativity.
Ian.
I'm so excited about AI. I mean, there are people that
I can't
fear
tell
it.
if you're serious or not.
No, I am. Seriously, I am. If you saw the daily workload at the UN, you would share my excitement. But it's complex, right? The UN, think of the Security Council. You can't get it wrong, right? So there have been a lot of nervous people thinking, well, if we let the machines transcribe this, what about different languages, different accents? But it's getting better and better by the week. And somebody once said, we tried it, and it talked about the two-street solution in the Middle East. Okay, train the machine. Now it says two-state solution. It's okay. But we have a very 20th century, that's being kind, approach to how we cover some of these meetings. We have press officers in meetings, transcribing, writing notes, summaries, analysis. We're trying to do it in different languages. You hear people rattling away on old Dell keyboards. It's quaint, it's nice, it's outdated, right? And I considered myself a pretty good writer and editor. I now put my notes into various machines. Oh my God, it's so much better, right? So we will embrace it. People are embracing it now, and it will revolutionize what we do. We will not just be transcribing, we will be able to, within minutes, understand the positions of countries on key issues and how they're shifting immediately after a Security Council meeting or a General Assembly session. That's fascinating for any student of geopolitics, international relations, to be able to capture that shift, new alliances. It's an amazing opportunity. You will be able to take a UN report that is really off-putting and boil it down to the basics, like at a glance. If that's not an opportunity, I don't know what is. So
Feed it into Sophia, I believe.
I'm
Yeah.
downloading it.
Make video.
Got an idea. Let's talk about some of the challenges and responsibilities of going to direct to consumer. Sophia, you've been public about the fact that Meta has pirated some of the data or the content from your book to train its large language model. How do you reconcile and balance having to put so much of your content on a platform knowing these things will happen?
Well, I mean, my book was a physical thing, so it's sort of irrelevant whether it's physical or digital. Unethical practices and companies are always going to think anything's up for grabs. My approach is to be as literate as I can possibly be, so that if wrongdoing is going on, I spot it. I think that's my instinct as someone who's done a lot of platform accountability reporting, but it was also a motivation behind why I built Sophia, because I thought, if I make an AI tool, I'll learn how these things work, and I'll be more in control when things like this happen. And I have, I think, been able to respond to learning that my book was pirated to be used for Meta AI. I have been able to feel a bit more resilient in my response, because I don't feel like it's all mystifying and confusing. I know what's happened, I know what they've done, and I know what I deserve in response. So stay sharp is kind of my attitude.
Call them out.
And call them out, yeah.
Ian, as you grow your audience, as you're on these different platforms, as more and more people begin to understand who the UN is and what it represents in the world, are you worried that's going to put you in the crosshairs of this administration in the US? A victim of your success in some ways?
Is this session recorded?
Yes.
Okay. The Secretary General has been asked this question in a different way, and he said, we need nerves of steel right now. And I think that's a great line, right? Stand up for who you are. Don't purge your websites of language. Think longer term, right? We stand for a lot of things that many people in the world take very seriously. We also stand for things that some governments don't currently like. But we can't change who we are. We can't suddenly not talk about climate, about LGBTQ rights, about equality, about all these key issues for the future of the planet. So we're going forward with it. We're not doing it to poke anyone in the eye. We're just saying this is who we are. This was built for a reason after the Second World War. Yes, it needs to change. And I think actually that's more of what the US administration wants to see right now. We don't disagree. There does need to be change. There does need to be accountability. There does need to be a streamlining. I personally think that the UN may become smaller in coming years. That's no bad thing. We have agencies in the field, so many acronyms, you cannot get your head around it. Why is there a UN AIDS organization and a separate WHO, World Health Organization? Why is there UNFPA, which is focused on women's issues and reproductive rights, and World Health Organization? That all these topics are critically important, but you can streamline that because they touch on similar themes. So I think we will tighten things. We are facing a liquidity crisis just like news organizations. Some countries are not paying their dues. Large percentages of the budget are not coming, and the UN's reserves are being depleted here. The UN is cutting jobs in the field in these agencies as a result of these cuts. But we'll stand firm. We will, to your point about audience, I want to add that the donor community is critical. This isn't just about informing the public or helping news media with their reporting. It's about reaching donors who are incredibly generous. Our projects are not just financed by taxpayers and governments. There are donors that supply tens of millions of dollars to the UN. We need to do a better job to show what we're doing with that money. And to the direct-to-audience point, that's a critical avenue for us, right? We have traditionally thought, let's get this content on the evening news in the countries where the donors live, and we rely on the APs, the Reuters, the media organizations, the TV stations to do that. Well, we have an incredible opportunity not just to do that, but to go direct to audience, to create donor communities, is what I'd call it, on the platform I hope to build in the next year. Bring them into the conversation, make them active participants. We love the fact they are so generous, but let's keep them engaged on these key topics. Let's have live events. You've been telling me about that as a potential solution to create ongoing conversations that draw more people and draw more donors in. Because trust me, with these aid cuts that we're currently looking at, there is going to be disaster and tragedy around the world in coming years. So we have an incredible opportunity to tell that story and make sure that donation stream does not dry up.
We're going to close. I have one more question, and then we'll see if we can get a few questions from the audience. But as you look to the future of information sharing, do you think our society is going to be better informed? Will they have more and more access to the public affairs information they need to lead quality lives, or is it going to get more and more fragmented or more chaotic and crowded?
I think it's the latter. That's why I've always had this, frankly, sort of desperation of attempting to keep up with it. And it's just not sustainable to constantly be sort of chasing algorithms, which is what I feel like this space is leading to. And the most sustainable models that appear to be coming out with it are, whether it's a company or a business or an organization or an individual, when you can generate something with a consumer, an audience member, whoever it is, that stands the test of them not seeing you for a month because you've not been on the For You page, right. Stands the test of they see your book on the shelf and they're going to buy it, stands the test of they hear something happens and they're going to show up for you. And obviously building revenue streams where perhaps they can also help support you. All of these things need to stand the test of increasingly fragmented media. But for me, I have only built that amongst my really core sort of super fans because I've shown up so often for them on TikTok and Instagram. I would not have built that otherwise. In London, I get recognized maybe once or twice a month. And had I just had my journalism, be published by the publishers and then not amplified it any further, things like that they wouldn't have happened. So you have to think, how do you build that feeling and relationship that stands the test of algorithms?
I don't think it's a surprise to anyone if I say that people are turning away from the news. It's overwhelming, it's depressing. So it's critical that we find ways of telling those stories in terms of why it matters to you. You know, why should America care about people dying of AIDS in East Africa? Yeah. Right? America's done some amazing work since the George W. Bush era, actually, under a Republican administration on AIDS in Africa. An incredible amount of money was invested. Why does that matter? You know, why does stopping conflict matter? Why does educating the public on public health matter? It matters because it could affect you. It could have reverberations around the world. That's the challenge for me at the UN. It's the challenge for every single journalist right now. So I try and be glass half full and positive about this. We have a critical moment, and the time is right to tell this story as well as possible.
Do we have any time for questions? Yay. Thank you. I put her on the spot there. But go ahead.
Hi, thank you. I feel very energized by the things you said. A question for Sophia. Are there any journalists who go the same path as you that are inspiring for you, that you learn from? So journalists as content creators?
Cleo Abram is who I really look up to in the US. Cleo Abram was here actually, I think a couple of years ago. And I think what is interesting about that is often my blueprint for the work that I do, or when I try and look for inspiration, I don't have anyone to look up to who straddles social media and content creation and traditional journalism. I'm fairly unique for doing that in the way that I am doing and with these sort of specific organizations that I work with. And that's in one way quite destabilizing. I wish I had more of a path to follow. It would probably help clarify loads of things in my life. But on the other hand, you just used the word energized. I find it energizing as well. I appreciate not everyone would find that energizing, would probably find it scary. Sometimes I wake up and feel the same. But, largely it's energizing.
Last question.
Thank you. I'm Mari Manninen from Finnish Daily, Helsingin Sanomat. I would like to ask you, I was a little bit worried when you said that you're gonna do eyewitness journalism. Why are you using word journalism? You're not independent, and you're definitely doing kind of like, I would even say propaganda for UN.
That's a good question. I think we need a few more minutes for that. Look, I'm hardwired to think like a journalist. Sometimes people say, "Oh, he's a former journalist." I say, "No, I'm still a journalist, right? That's in my blood." And it's a good question. I have to sometimes sort of rewire myself to say we're content creators, but I would actually take issue with that. In the past, as a journalist for a news agency, I would look at UN content and think, yeah, it's all about the UN, right? The video it keeps doing cutaways to people with UN helmets and UN trucks and pushing a UN line. Take a look at what we're doing, right? The platform might not be there. We're trying to tell stories in the field about topics that are of interest to the UN, right? We're on the ground in Gaza doing some very brave work. It's not about the UN. It's about the plight of people trying to survive day to day, moving from place to place in incredibly bad conditions. It's trying to highlight the conflict in Sudan. It's not about the UN. It's about the incredible suffering in Sudan, the worst crisis in the world right now. Not a lot of people follow it. We are telling stories about the people, how they're moving to countries all around Africa, the knock-on effect it's having. It's not about us, so it's definitely not propaganda. I respect your question. I know where you're coming from, but I'm trying to move the needle to highlight issues that people need to know about. This is why aid is important. This is why conflict must end. It's not about, oh, we're great. Not at all.
I think it's right at journalism festivals that we do address the semantics of it. We have to remember these semantics and the debates about them are useless for our audiences who just see all this video and it's all information, it's all content. They aren't there thinking, is this journalism? Is it not? They're not thinking that. And that's why my attitude's always like, what I'm producing is further information that is mucking in with all this other information. Information is a neutral term. Some information is bad, some is good, some is biased, some is not. It's all information.
Yeah, absolutely. To the students in Berkeley, we were discussing, what would you like to consume? How would you like to consume this information? And I raised the issue of video explainers. Like, what should they look like? And I had just been asked by my staff, should we go in this direction or that direction for this 2-minute video on Sudan, coming up to the 2nd anniversary of the latest stage of this war? And I thought, you know what, why ask me? Ask the students, right? So currently those students are talking to my production teams about what should it look like. It's not about the UN, it's why is this war critical and why the world needs to pay more attention to it. Nothing to do with us. And we're doing it in the way they want it, which I think is profoundly important and exciting.
Well, thank you both. There's a lot more to discuss. They will be posting up around Perugia, most likely the Brufani Bar, if you want to find them. So thank you so much.
Thank you.